Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 2nd of February of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And one of the most important updates is that the European Union has just approved 50 billion euros of additional aid to Ukraine. This is a very important update because, as you can see, not the money is important, the time when this piece of news appeared. And this piece of news appeared exactly at the same period of time when Zelensky and Zaluzhny has a conflict, when Zelensky wants to dismiss Zaluzhny. So what does it mean? This piece of news, first of all, means that European Union is going to support Ukraine, and that regarding the fact that Zaluzhny will be dismissed, a person who is very famous, who is every single Ukrainian loves Zaluzhny, and now we see some help, and the Ukrainians and the European countries and Western countries try to reduce the stress and the pressure in Ukrainian society by saying them that you're going to receive a lot of money, so don't worry. At least I see this piece of news like this. Furthermore, Zelensky and his team start spreading negative information against Zaluzhny, trying to blame him in different things. And first of all, not just trying to blame him in different things, they try to make people not to love him or even to hate him. According to some sources, Zelensky says that Zaluzhny was dismissed after Zelensky received like an information piece of news from Zaluzhny personally face to face that Ukraine is no longer able to show any progress or any results on the ground within the next 6 months. So basically Zaluzhny told Zelensky the truth in his eyes, and that was the things that Zelensky didn't accept. He didn't accept the truth, and he took a decision to dismiss him. So it's like one of the options, one of the point of views or rumors or talks that goes that we see right now. Another option why Zaluzhny was dismissed, another like opinion why Zaluzhny was dismissed, is that according to information according to information of that source, Zelensky wanted to fire Zaluzhny after he learned that the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine was conducting a secret negotiations with the West to end the conflict in Ukraine, according to journalist Hersh. So what does it mean to end the conflict in Ukraine? It doesn't mean capitulation. So as soon as Zelensky found out that Zaluzhny talked with the Western countries about the capitulation, of course Zelensky took a decision to dismiss him. So there are at least two versions that the present office of Zelensky tried to spread among people, and both of them aimed to reduce the influence of Zaluzhny in the society. So it's very interesting, but if you remember, I told you my opinion about the situation. According to my understanding of the next phase to the special military operation, Zaluzhny is no longer required for Ukraine. He's the general and commander of ground operation, offensives, counter-offensive, flank attacks, encirclements, and many other different global things about talking about military situation. As I understand, Budanov is going to be the next, let's say, commander-in-chief, because he's the secret, let's say, special force. And this is going to be completely different approach how to let's say follow the special military operation in the next phase, and this will be under complete his control, and there are going to be a lot of secret operation, a lot of assassinations, a lot of terror acts, and many other things that this person have already done in the past. Now we are moving to the situation on the ground, and the most important updates are coming from Avdiivka. We have already discussed the situation in the previous video, but today I would like to pay your attention and to tell you and to discuss more details, because from one side, if we take a look at map, we see that the Russians, yes, managed to establish control over additional block, over additional residential area almost in the central part. And we are talking with you about this territory. We during the previous 24 hours we received the geolocated confirmation of Russian control over this territory. This video was published by the Ukrainian sources. On this video we can see significant number of FPV drone strikes. Later the Russian, probably, as I know, Russian let's say open source intelligence organizations geolocated this video, and they provided the coordinates, and according to this video provided by the Ukrainians, the Ukraine FPV drones attacked the Russian forces in this part of the residential area and in this one, which is 100% confirmation of additional Russian progress, and that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to enter the central part of Avdiivka. So what does it mean? we need to understand what this bridge had, what this territory, what kind of value this territory brought to the Russians after they managed to establish control over this territory. Before we start discussion, of course, first of all, it's better to talk about, let's say, the eastern flank of this territory. According to different reliable mappers, the Ukrainians, after they lost control over this territory, took a decision to withdraw their positions from these two tree lines. So we are not saying that the Russians have captured them as a result of, let's say, offensive operation. The Ukrainians took a decision to withdraw this territory to the east or maybe to the south, and that means that very likely within the next, let's say, 24 or 48 hours, the Russians will establish control over this territory completely. Not like capture, they will have to waste some time for clearing this territory, for demining this territory. They will be always under Ukraine FPV drone strikes. So a day or maybe a day and a half, the Russians need to, let's say, completely establish control over this territory. The Ukrainians, when they were abandoning this territory, were using two roads. That was the first way the Ukrainians were withdrawing their positions to the central part of Avdiivka and the southern one, and that was the second one. But as I understand now, the Ukrainians are no longer able to use this way, because this territory is already under complete Russian fire control from the new territory, from the new gains. So the Russians understand the Ukrainian movements, and that's why we continue receiving more and more updates, more and more geolocations from this territory, from the area of the main supply and, let's say, evacuation road, how the Russians were bombing this territory heavily, which means that the Russians see everything. They see the Ukrainian roads, they see how the Ukrainians evacuate soldiers, armored vehicles, and wounded soldiers, how they bring supplies, and they covered this territory with every type of weapon we have, sometimes without even any aimings. They know that they need to attack this territory, and they know that if they attack, anyway, there are going to be losses from the Ukrainian side. So obviously now we understand that very likely that the next Russian step in this area is going to be attack to the east along this territory, with the purpose to establish control over this additional, let's say, sector. And this is going to be, obviously, the Russians will push the Ukrainians, but this is not going to be the primary Russian target, the primary Russian attack. Of course, it's very important to attack behind the main Ukrainian stronghold that located to the south of Kamyanka. This stronghold, we see the signs of the trenches, and to force the Ukrainians, let's say, to step back, which will ease the further Russian progress and movements from the eastern flank. And but I believe, and as I see according to the configuration of the map, that the battle for Avdiivka, the battle for the central part, for the eastern part, can be finished much more faster, and there is going to be no need to attack, let's say, to the eastern part to collapse this territory, from the other side to attack to the forest, let's say, to cut these territories. Everything can be finished much more faster. And to complete the battle for Avdiivka faster, and this is exactly what the Russians are doing right now, they need to continue development of their progress and their foothold in this area. So as I understand, and as I see right now, according to the, let's say, global configuration and updates we receive from this territory, the next, and not even the next, but the current Russian goal and current Russian, let's say, target is to establish control over this territory and to get under control the villages, like the streets like Kostubinskaya street and Pionierskaya, so this sector. So the Russians currently are storming this territory, and if the Russians are able to do this, then they will be able to cut Avdiivka at least in two parts. They will be able to cut the chemical plant from the rest of Avdiivka, and the Ukrainian soldiers who are currently located in the central, in the 9th quarter, in the eastern part of Avdiivka, will appear in operational encirclement. You may say that's how is it possible? I will tell to you and I'll explain to you. First of all, if the Russians are able to capture this territory, the Ukrainians will lose most of their supply and support roads, and they're gonna have just few supply roads in this case. And this is the first supply road that goes along Industrialny Ave. This is the first supply road to the southern and the eastern part of Ukraine. and this is going to be the second supply road to the same area. So as you can see, there are not many options. The Ukrainians can't move their supply, let's stay further to the south, because from this area, this territory is under complete Russian control. There is no possibility to use this way. This area is under fire control from many directions, and the distance between Russian and Ukrainian positions are very close. Furthermore, according to some sources, the Russian commanders and reconnaissance and sabotage groups have access to this road, so it will be like a suicide operation if Ukrainians continue using or start using this way. So this is the first thing. Another important thing that if the Russians can get, as we discussed, they will cut this area and they will establish complete control over this industrial AF area. Another important thing, today we got very interesting updates and from this territory. We have the video of how the Russians were bombing exactly this sector, this triangle, this square, with FABs, with multi-launch rocket systems, with artillery, with different types of FABs, 250, 500, 1500. So as you can see, this is like a video of different scenes, of a lot of videos where made one movie, and we see significant number of bombs that were sent on this direction. You need, what is important in this video is that the bombing strikes took place exactly in the area of intersection of the main supply roads that left for Ukraine. So as you can see, there is one supply road, as we discussed. This is the second one, and this is like the intersection of these two roads, which means that currently, when talking about the heart of Avdiivka defense operation, as I understand, this is the heart of Avdiivka. And as you can see, the Russians are bombing the heart of Avdiivka heavily. Furthermore, if we increase the numbers of updates, let's say since the beginning of January, we're gonna see one important thing. Pay attention to these icons. As you can see, since the beginning of the month, the Russians were bombing this territory heavily, exactly the main supply road of Ukraine army, the main supply road, and a little bit, a few hundred meters to the west, to the east, but mainly this supply road. So as you can see, according to information we have, the Russians have already established complete fire control over the Ukrainian positions and over the supply roads in this area. So basically, there is already operational encirclement. Of course, if the Russians are able to establish control over this territory, the Ukrainians, first of all, they will try to repel the Russians, but when they lose this foothold, they will always try to counterattack with the purpose to restore control over these territories. Of course, always if, right? So that's why, before establishing complete superiority and complete control, the Russians will spend a few weeks to dig in deeper, to repel the Ukrainian attacks, and after a few weeks of clashes for this exactly foothold, everything will be resolved for Avdiivka. Furthermore, if we calculate the distance between, let's say, the current Russian positions, new gains in this area, and let's say the southern part, Tsarskaya Khota, Sabornaya, Sportivnaya, and Chernyshev Street, the distance between these two territories is less than 5 kilometers, just 4 kilometers and 780 meters. So it's nothing for mortar systems, it's nothing for tanks, it's nothing. Furthermore, if we calculate the distance between possible Russian gains and next Russian focus and, let's say, the main supply road in the future, the distance is less than 1 kilometer, just 720 meters. So as you can see, the situation develops for the Ukrainians not very good. And now we are moving to the southern part, because we also have a lot of updates. Since the morning, the Russians published significant number of videos of how they were bombing this territory. This is, as I remember, this is Vinogradniki residential area, and the Russians just for the previous 24 hours published at least 2 videos from this territory, how they were bombing the Ukrainian forces in Ukrainian positions with stealth flamethrower systems. This is the first video, and then a little bit later we got another one. So the focus of multi-launch rocket systems and stealth flamethrower systems in this area means that the Russians have some plan to continue their offensive operation on the southern axis and to establish control over this territory as well. So as I understand, maybe the Russians have already launched, maybe not, but in a very near future, probably we are not talking about weeks or days, maybe we are talking about hours. The Russians will attack this territory with the purpose to establish complete control over this territory. And if the Russians are able to do this, then they will be able to shorten the distance, and the most important, they will be able to get closer to the let's say to the ninth block of Avdiivka and to establish control over Ukrainian positions on the southern part of the stronghold. So from one side, as you can see, there are still a lot of Avdiivka. There are eastern part, the stronghold, forest, the southern part, but to finish the destiny, to determine the destiny, the final days or destiny of Avdiivka, to number the days of Avdiivka, the Russians need to conduct two operations: to establish control over this territory and to move to the north on the southern axis. And if they can implement these two operations, then this is going to be the end for Avdiivka. The end. Obviously, they're going to be panicked. The Ukrainians will start running from this territory, but we'll see. We'll see what is going to be. Now we are moving to Bakhmut Artyomov's direction. We have just few updates. The Russians continue storming and attacking the Ukrainian forces on the hill 215.7. Significant number, as you can see, of FPV drone strikes were published just during the January and February, but yet the Russians haven't launched the ground operation. Now we're moving a little bit to the north. The Russians still continue storming the Ukrainian positions in the area of the main defense belt between Bogdanovka and Ivanovska. As you can see, for now there are no changes on the ground, just like clashes and without any ground operation. The information about the Ukrainian counterattack on the north of Bogdanovka confirmed. As a result of a counteroffensive operation, the Ukrainians managed to restore some positions in this area, and they forced the Russians to step back to the northeast in direction of this stronghold. There are no more changes on the ground. We haven't received almost anything from Siever's direction. The only important update is that, according to some sources, the Russians were forced to step back from Ukrainian side of Yasikovka river. This is the river, and if you remember, during the previous months they managed to cross the river and to establish control over the few tree lines. Maybe they were preparing for another attack in direction of Fedorovka, but now the sources are saying that the Russians withdrew their positions, let's say to improve their positions and not to be under fire of Ukraine's FPV drones. When talking about Liman direction, we have a lot of interesting updates without geolocations for now. According to information we have as a result of clashes and offensive operation, the Russians, according to some mappers, managed to establish control over this territory and to force the Ukrainians to step back. But this is not just the only thing that happened. According to information we have, the Ukrainians, without any Russian pressure, without any Russian attack, took decision to abandon some positions as well. And according to some Russian sources, as a result of, let's say, not even offensive operation, but as a result of abandoning operation, the Ukrainians left this territory, and now probably the Russians will continue offensive operation and will take the abandoned Ukrainian territories under their control. So you see that the Russians are getting closer and closer to Yampulovka and Cerny. When talking about Tabayevka, Kupiansk direction, we haven't received any updates about further Russian progress in the vicinity of Peshchane. The only update we have is another video from Ukrainian side of FPV drone strikes against the already Russian trenches in this area, which means that the Russians still haven't managed to capture this stronghold that lays on the way to Kotlarovka-Kislovka, which means that there are still no clashes for these two villages, but very likely they're going to start very soon. When talking about Senkovka, according to mappers, the Russians continue their offensive operation further in the direction of the railway station Senkovka, and very likely within the next few days the mappers will update this territory and will color this area under the color of Russian control. When talking about southern direction, we haven't received almost anything. The only interesting picture we got from the village by the name of Girnik, another Russian Iskander strike that took place on the 1st of February, and as a result of that attack, a few more buildings, temporary positions of Ukrainian forces were destroyed. If you remember, just yesterday we were talking about the same story in the cities like Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. Now we are moving further to Novomikhailivka. We haven't received any new updates about this territory, the same as about Vremivka Tactical Bridgehead and Rabotina. The same stories: artillery duels, FPV drone duels without any changes in the movements on the ground. And almost the same story when talking about Kherson and Kharkiv direction. The only important thing we need to note is that the Russians continue bombing the Ukrainian positions in Novoberislav and Berislav with FAP. On this video we can see, as the Russian calls discoteca in this area, a lot of bombs were sent and very heavy explosions. On this video we can see the same during the different period of time, or maybe this is the same video but it's the consequences of the previous strikes, but or during the daylight. When talking about Kharkiv, no updates, no changes, no additional information about the situation on this foothold or possible Ukrainian foothold that was opened, or maybe not, a little bit to the west, southwest of this area. The Russians attack and made few strikes against the Ukrainian positions in Kherson itself, and the Russians bombed the Ukrainian forces along the Dnipro River, their bases, the boats, and so on, and but without any movements or changes or the numbers or details about the consequences of those strikes. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.